For Creamer Media's Polity, I'm Shannon de Rayhove. Former editor of the Sunday Times, Ray Hartley, joins me to discuss his new book, Ragged Glory, The Rainbow Nation in Black and White. You've been fortunate enough to witness firsthand South Africa's democracy take shape as an official in the constitutional negotiations of the early 1990s, as well as in your role of political reporter for Business Day and the Sunday Times. Now, your book is full of gritty, vivid memories and first-hand accounts, like Mandela telling you that after retirement he intended to fix the plumbing in his Houghton house. What method did you use to gather so many memories, and what overall structure did you apply to your story?
Yeah, I'm just a very good hoarder. So I kept a lot of documents, and thank goodness I did, because the early period was pre-internet. And you know, after 95, 96, getting up to 97, you can get most stuff online. But before that, it's quite hard to track down some of these things. So I had a huge vault, really, of first-hand stuff that I'd collected. And then I did a lot of interviews. I interviewed a lot of the key players. And of course, I was also involved in reporting on some of these things. So it was a mixture of those things.
Your book, Ragged Glory, is in many ways the story of how three presidents, Nelson Mandela, Thabo Mbeki and Jacob Zuma, tried to shape South Africa's destiny in very different ways. While you argue that Mandela was widely regarded as a saint, do you concede that Mandela's leadership was not without its flaws, and that under his watch the predatory elite sowed the first seeds of corruption? Elaborate on this.
Yeah, I think that it's, you know, these stories developed over a long time, you know. Corruption, well, you know, if you go right back to Mandela, you've got Sarafina II, the first big corruption scandal of the democratic South Africa. And right then and there, Mandela could have stepped in and said to his health minister, "You're fired. We're not going to run a government like this. This is not how we do things." And it would have sent a very clear message right then and there to everybody that you better stay clean, otherwise you're not going to have a career in politics in South Africa. But he didn't. You know, he basically, you know, some junior official in the department got fired. The minister was never sanctioned, and she went on to be promoted. And yeah, so although in that case there's no question that she stole any money, but she signed off on this contract, and there was a lot of public money that was spent that shouldn't have been. So those examples are very important. Dalla Omar went to the airport to welcome back Alan Boesak. Alan Boesak was coming back to South Africa to face trial for taking money from church donors for the anti-apartheid struggle. So it was a clear moral breach, and yet he was treated like a hero. And I think Mandela sent Dalla Omar, his minister, to the airport to do that. And I don't think it was a wise thing to do. Again, the ANC could have said at that point, no, you know, you will stand trial, and if you're guilty of this, we are not going to be very pleased with you. You know, that's not acceptable.
You show how Thabo Mbeki had a vision of modernizing South Africa's economy, and how he engineered the fateful decision to move ahead of his trade union and communist alliance partners. Do you think he was trying to break up the ANC alliance? Do you think he miscalculated their reaction? And in the long run, how do you think Thabo Mbeki's presidency will be remembered?
Yeah, that's a very, very tough question, because Thabo Mbeki is such a difficult person to assess and to put a clear, you know, single idea onto that presidency is almost impossible. I think that he thought my face was on the ballot paper, the ANC was elected, we are going to lead and we are going to set the policy agenda. And he even said at one point that he thought that it was inevitable, that the alliance would break up at some point. He backtracked from that afterwards, obviously, because there was a lot of controversy. But I think his vision was that we're the elected government, we've got to do the policy thing. And he pushed gear through, you know, against the wishes of a lot of people in the left. And it was quite a courageous thing to do. It really, you know, he was prepared to take on water politically. But then he also pushed other things which were far less admirable, like, for example, his policy on AIDS. And so he opened himself up to, you know, making enemies at every turn, making enemies here, and eventually the critical mass of those enemies overwhelmed him, and he was thrown out at Polokwane. But I think when we look back, we'll say that Mbeki's economic policy and fiscal discipline and the management of the economy and of government finances was a good legacy, I think.
Jacob Zuma's presidency saw the rise of a chauvinistic elite which questioned the very foundations of the new South Africa and its constitution. Under him, a new arrogant security elite began to roll back the human rights culture. How can South Africa's electorate prevent this country from spiraling out of control?
Well, I think that South Africa's institutions have to stand firm and independent. And at the moment they are. You know, the courts have just ordered that the spy tapes be handed over to the DA, the official opposition. So that's an independent institution clearly doing its job. I think the problem is that there's a lot of undermining of these institutions. So it's all good and well to have great courts, but what if cases never come to these courts? What if the people appointed to the prosecuting authority are tainted and don't go for certain big political figures? And there's signs that that's happened. So there's a battle really for these institutions to fight for their independence. But as long as we have powerful independent institutions like Thuli Madonsela, like the courts, and like the media in South Africa, I think that South Africa will continue to be a functional democracy. The only question is, at what point do those institutions get severely undermined? And in the future, that's possible.
Cyril Ramaphosa appears in your book as a polished, patient politician, cleverly advancing South Africa's constitutional negotiations, even contriving to have the NP replace its negotiator Tertius Delport with the more amenable Rolf Meyer, and bowing out gracefully, saying he was still too young when outmaneuvered by Thabo Mbeki to be Mandela's successor. What do you think are Ramaphosa's strengths and weaknesses, and what do you think the future holds for him?
I think Ramaphosa's great strength is as a negotiator. It was his strength in the National Union of Mine Workers, which he led through the 1980s, and it was his strength at the constitutional talks. And I think that it's a strength that this country could do with right now, because we do need to renegotiate the economic policy framework. You know, I think business, labor, and government have to do something to end the economic stagnation that's taking place and the problems in the labor market. So that's a strength of his. I think he's a wily politician, and he's probably got a tough task if he wants to take over from Jacob Zuma, because I think there are other people in the party that Zuma would prefer.
In your book, you recall how back in 1996 the Constitutional Court rejected aspects of South Africa's newly negotiated constitution, and that certain clauses had to be amended to be in line with the agreed constitutional principles. Can you please reflect on this episode, and in particular the apparent prescience of the Constitutional Court in insisting that the role and independence of the Public Protector's Office be strengthened?
Yes, that was one of the issues right back. I think once the Constitution had been drawn up, the final Constitution, it had to be ratified by the Constitutional Court. And much to everybody's surprise, because there'd been this incredible negotiation process, there was agreement in Parliament, it was voted through by more than the two-thirds majority, and then the Constitutional Court said, no, you have not been true to some of the constitutional principles which you're obliged to follow. And one of the issues was the Public Protector's Office. I think it was very prescient, very important at that point as well, for the Constitutional Court to stamp its authority, to say we are the final arbiter on the law in South Africa. And it made a statement which resonates to this day. I think the Constitutional Court hasn't lost that position.
Do you believe that South Africa can be a great country, or is it destined to be like so many other countries, crippled by corruption, political unrest and poverty?
Well, I'm a South African. I think South Africa is a great country. I think the title of this book, Ragged Glory, I thought about that long and hard. There's glory. We mustn't forget that we've come a long way from being a country with Bantustans, with most of the population without the vote, heading for complete economic disaster, far worse than our current slow growth situation. So let's not forget the glory, but it's ragged. There are very powerful people in the society who are willing to tear up that constitutional arrangement that was reached and rebuild politics as a machine to enrich them and to enrich an elite. So that's got to be watched. That's the downside.
What is your hope for South Africa?
My hope is that we will do again what we've done before, come together as a country, sort through our problems and take a giant step forward. I think this time it's got to be around the economy. We're reaching a crisis point with economic growth and with the state of our labour markets. And hopefully out of that crisis, we will show again that we're a country that can pull together and build something special to take us forward.
Thank you. That was editor, journalist and author Ray Hartley discussing his book Ragged Glory.